Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really digging into the 1970s. Not just the music, but the gear. Specifically, this moment when guitar pedals kind of decided they weren't just simple tools anymore. They wanted to be experiments.
Yeah, it's a fascinating period. You think 70s guitar, maybe fuzz, maybe wah, maybe a bit of phase. But underneath that, Maestro, especially under Norlin, was doing something else entirely. They were looking at these huge, complex synthesizers.
The big modular ones, right? Walls of knobs and cables.
Exactly. And they were thinking, how do we get that kind of power, that kind of weirdness into something a guitarist can stomp on?
So that's our mission today. We're exploring this specific slice of Maestro history. We've picked out 4 units, really groundbreaking ones, all developed with input from, or at least heavily influenced by, the synth guru Tom Oberheim.
Mm-hmm. And we're talking about stuff that wasn't just about making your guitar louder or adding a bit of swirl. This was about deep sound manipulation, control, even randomness.
Okay, so full disclosure for you listening. These weren't exactly massive hits.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely not like your classic Phase 90 or Tube Screamer that everybody had. These were more like concepts made real, production prototypes almost. Ideas that were, frankly, years, sometimes decades ahead of what most players were ready for.
But that's why they're so interesting now, right? It's like a shortcut to understanding where today's really complex effects came from.
Precisely. If you want to trace the lineage of modern sound design pedals, this era, this specific Maestro-Norlin-Oberheim nexus, is crucial.
All right, let's nail down the time frame for everyone. We're talking early 70s, say 72, 73, running up to maybe 76, 77.
Yeah, roughly that window, the Norlin years. And Norlin owned Gibson, owned Maestro. They had the resources. And crucially, they fostered this connection with Tom Oberheim. He wasn't just some consultant.
He was actively developing his own iconic synths at the same time. Sams, the early polyphonics.
Right, so you have this incredible cross-pollination happening. The concepts from the synth world, voltage control, envelope following, sample and hold, these weren't just abstract ideas. Oberheim and the Maestro engineers were literally figuring out, okay, how can we adapt this system thinking for a guitar signal?
It changes everything. It's not just modifying the sound anymore.
It's almost synthesizing with the guitar signal as the source. That's why these pedals feel different. They feel like instruments in themselves.
Okay, let's dive into the first one. A great example of shrinking a complex tool. The Maestro parametric filter, the PF, comes out around 72, 73.
That's about right. And the PF is historically really significant. It shows Maestro wasn't just aiming for cool sounds, but solving real engineering problems. It was part of this wave of pretty experimental stuff they put out. Then the ring modulator was another wild one. But the PF was different. It was fundamentally about precise control, more studio tool than crazy effect.
Let's break that down because parametric filter sounds technical. Most guitarists think EQ. They picture, the little sliders, right? Graphic EQ.
Yeah, the Boss GE7 or something similar.
Yeah.
You get sliders for fixed frequencies, 100 hertz, 200 hertz, 400 hertz, and so on. Booster cut. Simple enough.
But parametric is a whole other level, especially for 1973 in a Stompbox.
Oh, totally different. It's a radical concept for a floor pedal back then. It's signals that shift towards studio thinking immediately. A graphic EQ is kind of blunt. Fifth frequencies often quite broad. The Maestro PF, even this early simplified version, gave you 3 independent controls that are standard in pro audio.
Okay, 3 controls. What are they?
First, you've got the frequency control. This is key. Instead of being stuck with, say, 1 kilohertz, you could sweep the dial and pick the exact center frequency you wanted to mess with.
So you could find that one annoying ringing frequency in your amp, or maybe push a specific harmonic that sounds good.
Exactly. Precision. Dialing it in for your rig, not just a preset band. Total control over where you're adjusting.
Makes sense. What's number 2?
Second is gain. Simple enough how much you boost or cut that frequency you just selected. Louder or quieter at that specific spot.
Okay, standard boost cut. But the third one, you said, is where the studio ambition really shows.
Yeah, the third control is bandwidth, or Q as it's usually called. This is the magic ingredient.
Q. Okay, why is Q so important? That's probably the one most guitarists haven't fiddled with much on a typical pedal.
Right. Q determines the shape of your EQ adjustment. How wide or narrow is the range of frequencies you're affecting? So if you crank the Q up high, the bandwidth gets super narrow, like a laser beam.
Okay.
This lets you do sonic surgery. Find that one specific feedback note that's killing you and just notch it out without messing up the frequencies right next to it.
So high Q is sharp, resonant, like a peak or a deep cut.
Precisely. But if you turn the Q down low, the bandwidth gets really wide and gentle, like a broad hill or valley.
More musical, maybe?
Yeah, that's your sculpting tool. You can add a broad, warm bump to the low mids to make a solo fatter without it sounding weirdly peaky or unnatural. It's this combination, choosing the frequency, setting the booster cut, and controlling the width that was just unheard of in a pedal. It wasn't just a tone knob. It was real signal processing.
And the tech needed to make that work. That tells
Yeah.
another story, right? You mentioned the power 18 volts, not the standard 9-volt battery.
Yeah, that's a critical clue. 9 volts is fine if your circuit is supposed to clip, like a fuzz. Distortion is the goal there. But with a parametric EQ, especially if you're boosting frequencies, maybe with a high Q.
You're making parts of the signal much louder.
Right. And if you try to do that with only 9 volts, you hit the voltage ceiling really fast. You run out of room.
And you get unwanted distortion instead of a clean boost.
Exactly. You get clipping where you wanted clarity. So Maestro needed that 18 volts for headroom. Headroom is just that space between your signal's average level and the point where the circuit starts to distort. Double the voltage, double the headroom, basically.
So the 18V allowed the PF to make those surgical boosts without distorting, keeping the signal clean, like a studio EQ.
That was the idea. Transparency and control.
Which tells you who they were aiming this at. Not the average GarageBand player in '73.
Probably not. They weren't asking for clinical EQs. They wanted more fuzz, louder amps.
Yeah.
This was for the session guys, the producers, maybe keyboard players crossing over, people who understood what a parametric EQ was and why they'd want that control. It was a utility tool before utility pedals were really a thing.
So its legacy isn't about sales figures.
No, it's about the concept. It proved you could put that kind of complex filtering, previously stuck in huge recording consoles, into a box at a musician's feet. It directly foreshadows all the graphic EQs, the more advanced filter pedals from Boss, MXR, later the boutique guys.
It's like the ancestor of all those tone-shaping utility pedals.
Pretty much. It's proof Maestro was thinking studio level for guitarists. Collectors want it not because it makes some iconic sound, but because it's a piece of history, a foundational block.
Okay, so precision was one angle. But Maestro in the 70s wasn't just about clean control. They definitely wanted to get weird. Let's shift gears now from surgical EQs to, well, pure randomness. Let's talk about the Maestro filter and sample hold. Around 74, 75.
Yeah, right in that pocket. And this pedal, this is where the Tom Oberheim synth influence just goes overt. It's not subtle anymore.
Right. If the PF was about control, the filter sample and hold, the S&H, was kind of about chaos.
Controlled chaos, yeah. Rooted directly in modular synthesis. This was peak synth-inspired Maestro.
The name itself, sample and hold, is pure synth talk. For listeners maybe not deep into synths, what does a sample and hold circuit actually do, and why put it on a guitar filter?
Okay, so a sample and hold module, it's fundamental in modular synthesis. It does something simple but really powerful. It takes a quick electrical measurement, a sample of some voltage that's changing over time. Often it's sampling a random noise source. Then it holds that specific voltage level steady for a short time until it takes the next sample.
So it's like taking random electrical snapshots and holding onto them for a beat.
That's a great way to think about it. And in synths, the classic use is to take that sequence of random step voltages and use it to control something else very often, the cutoff frequency of a filter.
Ah, okay, so Maestro took that whole concept.
And jammed it into a Stompbox. And they gave it 2 modes.
Right, let's start with the more normal-sounding mode first, the envelope mode.
Yeah, the envelope mode was basically a really good auto-wah or envelope filter. The louder you picked, the higher the filter frequency went. Play soft, it stays low and closed.
That classic funky wah-wah sound that responds to your playing dynamic.
Exactly. Very usable, very popular sound then and now, really. Funk, soul, prog rock guys love that touch-sensitive sweep. That was the commercially sensible part of the pedal.
But the other mode, the sample and hold mode, that's the reason people hunt this pedal down today, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That's the magic, the weirdness.
So how did that work with the guitar signal? You flip the switch to S&H.
Okay, so you flip the switch. Now, instead of your playing dynamics controlling the filter, an internal clock starts ticking. There's usually a rate knob to control how fast it ticks. At each tick of that clock, the circuit grabs a random voltage level from an internal noise source, and it instantly snaps the filter's cutoff frequency to whatever that random voltage dictates and holds it there until the next clock tick.
Whoa, so instead of a smooth sweep.
You get jumps, the filter frequency just leaps instantly to a new random position, then holds, then leaps again.
It sounds like the filter is playing dice.
That's perfect, yeah. You get these bubbling, bleeping, chirping sounds, totally random step filter sweeps. Imagine the filter going from a deep muffle to a high-pitched squeak, then to a mid-range honk instantly. No smooth transition, just snap, snap, snap.
I can just picture someone plugging that in for the first time in 1975 and thinking it's broken.
Oh, for sure. Or thinking their guitar was possessed.
Like, is this supposed to sound like a dial-up modem arguing with R2-D2?
That's not far off. It was pure sci-fi noise. Utterly alien for a guitar effect back then. Rock guitarists were chasing sustain and warmth, and Maestro hands them this random computerized gurgle. It was baffling for many.
So who did use it then, if not your average rocker?
Well, it definitely found its audience. Experimental players for sure. Keyboardists who already understood modular synth concepts and saw the potential. And adventurous guitars guys really into sound design, maybe session players looking for something totally unique for a track. Producers loved it as a texture machine.
It was basically the first time you could get that kind of systematic randomness happening away from your pedal board.
Pretty much, yeah. A radical concept.
And its legacy is huge, even if it wasn't a big seller initially.
Massive, yeah. The S&H pedal was light years ahead. It totally paved the way for all the random modulation effects, the complex step filters, things that became staples in electronic music, IDM, ambient stuff, decades later.
It brought that sequenced random control idea down to the floor.
And the demand now, collectors go nuts for these.
Right. Original units are rare and expensive.
Extremely. Funk players want them for that aggressive filter side. Jam bands use the S&H for trippy textures, electronic artists. It's a cult classic. It proved a Stompbox could handle really complex, non-linear synth logic. It treated the guitar signal like voltage, something to be sampled and manipulated, not just amplified.
Okay, that's a huge conceptual leap. Maestro was really pushing boundaries. Let's maybe pull back slightly from the pure synth chaos for a moment and look at how they applied similar thinking to make a popular effect more usable. Section 3. The Maestro stage phaser. This came out around 75, 76.
Yeah, right around then. And the stage phaser is interesting because it's kind of the flip side of the S&H. It shows Maestro looking at an effect everyone loved phasing and using their engineering chops not to make it weirder, but to make it way more practical for performing musicians.
And the timing was spot on. Phasing was everywhere, mid-70s. Funk bass, swirling guitars, disco strings.
Absolutely. It was the sound of the era. Maestro had other phasers, like the PS1A, the mini phase. But the stage phaser, as the name suggests, was specifically about live performance control.
To understand why it was a big deal, you have to think about what else was out there, right? Like the MXR Phase 90.
Exactly. The Phase 90 legendary tone, classic sound. But it's famously a one-knob pedal. Speed. That's it.
Which is fine until you want a different speed mid-song.
Then you've got a problem. If you want that slow, dreamy sweep for the verse, but a fast, Leslie-like shimmer for the solo.
You're bending down, trying to tweak that little knob with your hand in the dark between lyrics.
Right, while hoping you don't trip over a cable or miss your cue. Not exactly ideal for a pro player on stage.
So the Maestro stage phaser offered a pretty clever solution for the time.
It did. They called it preset speed selection. First off, the pedal itself was bigger, chunkier than the mini phase, built for the stage, more stable. But the key innovation was adding multiple foot-switchable speeds. Instead of just one speed knob, you had maybe 3 preset speeds you could access instantly.
So you could set up, say, a slow speed, a medium speed, and a fast speed.
Yeah, dial them in beforehand, maybe using internal trim pods, or sometimes there was still a master rate knob.
And then during the song, you just hit a dedicated foot switch to jump between speed 1, speed 2, speed 3.
Exactly. That was the breakthrough. It turned the phaser from just being on or off at one speed into a dynamic performance tool. You could ramp up the intensity for a bridge, drop back to a subtle pulse for a verse, all without missing a beat.
That's a huge difference in how you interact with the effect live. It becomes part of the arrangement, part of your playing.
Totally. And some versions even had that master rate knob alongside the preset switches, giving you the best of both worlds, fine-tune the current speed, or jump to a preset. Tonally, it still had that rich, lush Maestro phaser sound they were known for, deep and chewy. But its real value proposition was that stage-ready flexibility.
I can see keyboard players really digging that too. They often need those dramatic shifts in modulation.
For sure. That multi-speed function made it way more versatile than single-knob competitors. It's respected by collectors today, not necessarily for being the weirdest Maestro pedal, but as one of the most thoughtfully designed for the working musician. It showed they weren't just lab coat engineers. They understood the realities of playing live.
Okay, so we've seen studio precision with the parametric filter, synth chaos with the sample and hold, and now stage practicality with the stage phaser. It feels like all these threads, the advanced filtering, the random modulation, the desire for more control are leading somewhere big.
They absolutely are. They culminate in what's arguably the most ambitious, maybe even audacious, Maestro unit of the entire era. We have to talk about the Maestro USS-1 Universal Synthesizer System, released late in the game, maybe 76, 77.
The USS-1, even the name sounds serious. Universal Synthesizer System. This wasn't just another pedal, was it?
No way. This was Maestro's moonshot. This was them saying, okay, let's try and give a guitarist basically a modular synth's worth of effects in one integrated floor unit.
Wow. Not just combining effects, but designing them as a system.
That's the key. The ambition was huge. Under Norland, they were trying to package the core building blocks, filtering, distortion, modulation, triggering, into one box.
You described it earlier as maybe like an aircraft carrier for your feet.
Huh. Yeah, it wasn't far off. The physical size alone told you this was serious business. Much bigger than any single pedal, more like a small pedal board itself, and the interface. Multiple foot switches, lots of sliders for real-time control, very complex looking.
Okay, let's break down what was actually inside this beast. You said 4 main parts.
Yeah, essentially 4 interconnected modules drawing on what they'd already developed. First, you had a highly developed wah filter. It wasn't just a simple wah. It had manual control, probably via a treadle-like input or a separate controller, and an envelope filter mode for auto wah sounds.
So dynamic filtering right off the bat, building on pedals like the filter sample and holds envelope side.
Exactly. Then second, critically, it had a dedicated distortion fuzz section. You need drive to make filters and modulation really sing, especially for rock guitarists.
And I have the dirt. Okay, what else?
Third, and this is where it gets really wild again, it had the sample and hold random filter circuit built right in.
The same S&H from the standalone pedal.
Essentially, yes. Directly integrated into the USS-1. So now you could stack that crazy bubbling random filter on top of the distortion and the wah.
Whoa. Fuzz feeding into a random filter. That must have sounded absolutely insane. Like way beyond normal guitar tones for 77.
Wow. It was designed for creating textures no one else could get from a guitar rig. Pure alien soundscape territory. And then the fourth part, which is easy to overlook but vital for making it all work, was an integrated triggering system.
Triggering. What does that mean in this context?
It means making sure the guitar signal could reliably control all the synth-like parts, making the envelope follow our track properly, making the S&H clock sync up, ensuring the dynamics trigger the effects consistently. It was the internal logic trying to make sense of the complex interactions between the guitar input and all these voltage-controlled parameters. It was about making the system function as intended.
Okay, conceptually, that's mind-blowing for the mid-70s. A fully integrated guitar synth floor unit, but let's be real. This is complex analog tech from the 70s. Big box, lots of parts, probably hot, probably noisy. Was this thing actually usable live? Or was it more of a studio curiosity?
That's the million-dollar question with the USS-1.
Yeah.
It was definitely a theoretical masterpiece, somewhat limited by the tech of its day. Yes, the range of sounds was incredible. Classic fuzz wah, synth sweeps, the random glitches. You could get sounds no one else could. But reliability, noise floor. In a typical 70s club environment with questionable power, those are real challenges.
So maybe you needed a dedicated tech just to keep it running smoothly.
It wouldn't surprise me. Plus, it was expensive, really expensive. That alone put it out of reach for most players. It ended up being used by producers who could tame it in the studio, or really adventurous, well-funded players looking for those unique synthetic textures. Frank Zappa used one for a while, I believe.
Okay, so maybe not a practical success, but the vision, the historical foresight is undeniable.
Absolutely undeniable. Think about it. An integrated floor system with drive, filtering, modulation, random generation, all controllable in real time. Maestro basically prototyped the analog multi-effect pedal board a full decade before Boss ME series, or Roland GP series, started doing it digitally in the mid to late 80s.
They saw the future was integrated systems where effects talk to each other, not just a chain of separate boxes. That's incredibly forward-thinking.
It really sums up that whole Norland-Oberheim influence philosophy at Maestro. They weren't afraid to try something hugely ambitious, even if it was complex and costly. The USS-1's legacy isn't sales figures. It's the sheer audacity of the concept, the ultimate attempt to merge synth logic with a guitar pedal format, treating the guitar as a flexible sound source for synthesis.
Wow. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. From the surgical PF to the chaotic S&H, the practical stage phaser, and the behemoth USS-1.
Yeah, quite a journey through Maestro's wild side. And if you step back, the common thread through all 4 is pretty clear, isn't it? Maestro, in this specific era, consistently chose experimentation, studio-level thinking, and complex synth ideas over just making another safe mass-market fuzz pedal.
They were definitely prioritizing innovation, pushing the envelope, trying to see how far they could take the guitar signal using these new synth concepts. It wasn't about making the cheapest pedal, it was about making the most advanced pedal they could dream up.
Exactly. And taken together, these pedals really show that the 70s, particularly this period for Maestro, was where so many modern effects ideas were born. You see the roots of sophisticated EQ and filtering in pedals. The first real use of random modulation.
Yeah.
The idea of presets for stage control.
Yeah, the stage phaser.
And even the whole concept of the integrated multi-effects unit. It was all happening right there in these sometimes commercially unsuccessful analog boxes.
It paints this picture of a company just willing to take risks, maybe even fail commercially, just to push the technology forward. It does make you wonder, what if these had been huge hits? What if everyone copied the USS-1 in, like, 1978?
It could have completely changed the trajectory. Maybe we'd have had sophisticated analog multi-effects rigs as standard much, much earlier. But maybe the components weren't quite there. The price was too high. The average player just wasn't ready for that level of complexity yet.
Which brings us to a really interesting final thought, kind of bridging that gap between innovation and what the market wants. These pedals were ahead of their time. They were expensive. They were niche back then. But imagine if Maestro or a company like them released these exact pedals today into the current boutique market, where players actively seek out complex analog filters, weird modulation, sample and hold, integrated systems, and are willing to pay premium prices for them. Would these pedals still be niche cult items, or would they finally find their mainstream moment? Would their foresight finally pay off?
That's a fantastic question. Given how much interest there is now in deep analog sound design, in modular ideas bleeding into pedals, I suspect their time would finally have come. Today's players are educated on this stuff. They understand terms like sample and hold. They crave unique analog textures, and they will pay for complexity and quality. I think the world, or at least the dedicated pedal world, has finally caught up to where Maestro's head was at back in the mid-70s. It might have taken 50 years, but maybe that radical, expensive, beautifully ambitious vision of the Oberheim-influenced Maestro pedals would finally be truly appreciated, maybe even become hits.
The future of effects built on the commercial failures of the past. That's definitely something for you to chew on. Maybe go listen to some USS-1 demos online if you can find them. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.